We had Boston last year, we've got this one this year. So looks like the aviation industry is certainly getting back on its feet. In fact, it's getting back on its feet very quickly, almost too quickly, some would argue. Huge pickup in demand. Is it sustainable?
I think there is. I mean, there is pent-up demand for people that couldn't travel for 2 years. So in Australia, we're seeing 120% growth in leisure travel compared to pre-COVID levels. Business and corporate are back to 90%. Now, some of that is pent up, but we could see the economic activity and the underlying growth rates being really strong. And there's still a lack of capacity compared to demand, particularly internationally. Internationally, we're only at 50% of our pre-COVID levels, and demand is a lot greater than that. By the end of the year, we'll get to 85%, by March next year to 100%. But there is massive demand. If I could get more aircraft into the air, I'd be doing it tomorrow.
Okay, let's just sort of break down the component parts of that supply and demand and figure out what is happening here. You are having to raise fares. Aviation fuel, kerosene, super expensive right now. How far away from the point at which we start to see demand destruction as a result of those high fares do you think we are?
Well, because we have capacity well below where it was back in 19, we're still a long way away from noticing demand destruction. Because we're seeing internationally RASKs, average airfares, easily covering the oil price, easily. And load factors are unbelievably high. There's no capacity. So even as we put more and more capacity back on, we think that could be the case for some time. We may be in the situation for a year or two where we have less capacity than we have demand. Similarly on domestic, we're seeing all of the players wanting to manage we got the bells ringing in behind. We've got all the players wanting to recover fuel costs, and we see capacity being reduced domestically to get airfares up. Now, what we're talking about to cover fuel is roughly a 12% improvement in RASK, and that can be done with around a 10% capacity reduction, which is what we're seeing on average in the Australian market.
The problem with all of that is, yes, you are struggling to bring aircraft back on, but you're also struggling to bring the people to man the aircraft, to load the bags. There is a staff shortage that is across the entire industry. When do you think you will have enough staff to match what you want to do?
So we are in Australia. The issues have not been as bad as you've seen in Europe and North America. Our on-time performance has taken a hit, and our cancellation levels have gone up a little bit.
The lady with the bell is just walking past us right now, hoping she's going to go away.
So we haven't seen the problems that we have seen in other areas. And we advertised for 2,500 people recently, mainly cabin crew, and we had 25,000 applicants. So there's a lot of people that want to get in the industry. But one thing I will say, for an industry that has been in hibernation for 2 years, for an industry that saw a lot of people leaving the industry, I think there was always going to be some teething problems in getting there. In some cases, the problems are a lot worse than we expect them to be. But this industry is robust, and it will get all of those moving parts working efficiently together again. It is hugely complicated, the aviation industry, and it needs all parts of the industry functioning. That's airports, that needs the manufacturers, and it's airlines. I think we'll get there, and certainly in our case, in Qantas's case, we think we'll get back to pre-COVID levels of on-time performance and cancellations within the next few weeks.
Let's talk about the macro environment and what is happening. The RBA is already raising rates aggressively. You've got the Fed raising rates aggressively. Inflation is a massive problem at the moment. What do you see the economic cycle looking like? You're talking about demand continuing. Does demand continue if we get a recession?
So what always happens, I think, we've seen in a recessionary environment, there is a hit on demand. But you've got a couple of unique things taking place from where we're starting. Unemployment are unbelievably low levels. We're 3.9% in Australia. Savings during COVID went through the roof. There's $250 billion of savings in the Australian economy, private savings that are there. And you've got people willing to spend the money, even with the outlook looking with tightening monetary policy on experiences. So we haven't seen any pullback on people travelling or people going out to restaurants. So you've got a unique situation that's taking place at the moment. Certainly increased monetary policy, a recession will put pressure on air travel. It's always done in the past. But that pressure can be managed with supply and demand. And at the moment, and as I said, I think this will continue for some time, we have less supply than demand. So I think we can cope with that environment.
Just in terms of the fuel prices, what do you expect to happen there? What are you banking on? What are you thinking about? How hedged are you? And do you think you're at the point where you can continue to raise fares? Have you thought about fuel surcharges?
So we're covering fuel, as I mentioned, internationally.
Yep.
So if you take all of our hedging applied to domestic, we're 95% hedged till December. So we have some time to adjust to the environment that's there. I don't like fuel surcharges. We can't do them in Australia because the regulator there, the competitive authority, only wants you to advertise all-inclusive airfares.
Right.
So it doesn't make a difference. So you're better off just trying to include it in the airfare, and then over time, airfares will go up and down. And it's a competitive market, so that's the way we will be coping with it in the Australian market.
Let's talk about fuel in a little bit more detail. I saw Guillaume Fauré from Airbus yesterday. He'd just been into the announcement with you guys. They're going to invest with you to help kickstart the production of sustainable aviation fuel in Australia. Got a new Labour government. That's likely to be certainly leaning into that sustainability story in a fairly big way. Have you spoken to the government? What kind of an impact do you think it's going to have?
Yeah, really positive. I mean, this was a landmark announcement with Airbus and Qantas, $250 million Aussie dollars to get a sustainable aviation fuel industry started. And I think there's a number of advantages to it, which the Labour Party, the Labour government are actually very keen on. One, it gives you energy security, aviation energy security, which I think is a big thing in the current world. Secondly, it creates a lot of jobs. One estimates well over 15,000 jobs locally in Australia for just the sustainable aviation fuel industry. We do need a framework put in place like it is in the UK, the US and in Europe. And the government under the new Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, is very engaged with us in putting the framework into place to allow this industry to get created. So we're more optimistic than we have been for some time, and it's a good start with this new government.
Have you spoken to the new government?
I have. I've spoken to the new Prime Minister a couple of times. I've spoken to the new Transport Minister a couple of times, and we've raised this as one of the key areas that we want.
What kind of feedback are they giving to you in terms of getting this industry?
Very positive. They can see the logic in it. They can see the importance of it. They have a lot of priorities on at the moment. There's been a particular other energy issues in Australia in the last couple of weeks, but we have no doubt over the forthcoming months this will start appearing on the priority list.